So we've just finished the Revelo Scout Adventure trip, coming off a great week together, and thought we'd take a little bit of time just to reflect on our experience, the good, the bad, the ugly, what we learned, how we grew. What were some of the highlights or the standouts on, let's start with shelter. What about shelter?
And shelter was a feat that I knew very little about, and so I thought I could survive. Prior, like maybe I could just lay on the floor somewhere, hope for the best, get by a tree. But I quickly learned a lot about how possible it is to really build a shelter and make shelter, and with limited resources, and then sleeping in the shelters that we made, was convinced that may be better than tent camping.
Wow, that's a big statement.
I mean,
so if you were caught in a situation where you needed to build a shelter, what would be your go-to? Would you go with a lean-to? Would you go with a primitive hammock? Would you try a debris hut? Would you just cowboy camp? Like, what would you do and why?
Me, it depends on the weather.
Oh,
yeah. So if it was cold, I get cold easily. Bald head. If I don't have if I'm just wearing the clothes on my back, if I don't have a beanie or a sleeping bag, I'm definitely going with the lean-to. I slept in it last night. First night, the entire trip, that my bald head wasn't cold.
How about that?
Didn't need to wear my beanie.
That was the coldest night of the whole week,
great.
too. It was cold last night.
It was great.
So lean-to for baldness.
I was skeptical at first, but it's for cold, hands down.
Yeah, because it's a little bit lower, radiates that heat, keeps you warmer. What about you, Mike? What would you go for? What was your favorite shelter?
Well, first of all, I am convinced now that I need to have a tarp and a ridgeline everywhere I go. Like, just full stop. I already carry a poncho, but I don't want to be wet and setting up the tarp. So I'd rather have both.
Yeah.
And just how easily you can manipulate that tarp, in different configurations for warmth or, the rain or whatever. So like, I feel confident, like ridgeline, tarp, find an anchor point and fire away.
Yep.
But I think if I'm like out in the woods and it's not raining, I'd rather just sleep on the ground.
Yeah.
I'd rather cowboy camp.
Yeah.
But in a long-term survival situation, the jungle hooch, the raised bed, if that was in a bigger shelter, I think I would be much more comfortable like that.
Okay.
Because I needed more leaves.
It needed more leaves.
More leaves.
I love how Josiah teaches the rapid ridgeline, and it just kind of takes away the unknown and the complexities and makes it so simple that if you do carry some 550 cord and a tarp anywhere, anytime, you can get that ridgeline up. You can get a lean-to, you can get an A-frame, you can get that plow point. And I thought you did a really good job instructing that with a lot of clarity and patience. And then, if you're going to be there a little bit longer, you want to go for that primitive shelter. Yeah, I think I prefer the primitive hammock with a ridge line and a
Tarp.
Either if it's warmer, lean-to tarp, or if it's a little colder, which what I did last night, I like the more the A-frame to kind of secure that heat in. But I think that raised bed, that primitive hammock for me is.
And you're a fan of the 550 cord slats instead of the wood slats now, huh?
Oh man, you guys did me so right. So what do we call that now? It's like that's more the long term wilderness living.
That is
it was
comfort.
thriving, bro.
That's luxury.
So we framed out a bed and we weaved paracord, kind of like an old. It reminded me of an old hammock in a ship berth, and just a woven hammock, like bed springs. And I just put, a wool blanket on that and a mattress, like
Big
a little
thermarest kind of thing.
a foam pad in my sleeping bag. I guarantee you that was a good night's sleep.
Wow.
It's good stuff.
I appreciated the ridgeline training because I thought I knew what I was doing hanging a tarp. I was doing it wrong. And, and you even were able to explain like how the way I was doing it was actually going to be ineffective completely. So I'm okay.
I was the same way.
Yeah.
So first time I
So it's funny you say that because we've kind of talked about this a little bit over the last few days. Like once that's told to you, you're like, oh yeah, that's intuitive. I should know that intuitively, but I don't. And that's something that's come up. Like we need someone to tell us these things, like, and how these skills are disappearing because people aren't passing them down. And even though you learn them and it's like, oh, well, of course that makes sense.
Right.
But it's not as intuitive as that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, you're going to do something or you're going to do nothing, and neither one of those may be right. So if you have someone that tells you how to do something right and well, you'll not only do that, but you'll also pass that along. And that's true for discipleship too, right? Is that we just don't know how to live life in Christ apart from the Spirit using someone else that we can imitate Christ through, right? Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. And so we learn directly from the Lord. There's no doubt about that. But most time he chooses to use other people to show us how to follow and imitate him. And we need to do that and not forget that just because we know something doesn't mean that somebody else already knows it, right? Like we don't want to assume that someone just knows how to do that, but we want to take the time and ask and then impart what has been deposited within us for their benefit and sake.
Oftentimes we forget that God's presence is with us. And he hasn't left us. He will not forsake us. And just how you guys were right there next to us going, oh, no, redo that knot this way, or let me show you it again.
Straighten your arm, straighten your hand, straighten your hand.
All of those things, right? The Spirit is willing, and actually, like, it's his job, is desirous to come alongside, support, help. And with the posture of humility, like, I mean, he plays the background his whole, that's his job, and then so he doesn't scold us. He's not coming alongside and condemning, but really building us up, lifting us up, and so that's an encouragement to just be reminded of as we're discipling, we and teaching others, we're not left alone. But I kind of feel like, man, maybe I see why the disciples were a little paranoid. Go do this to all the nations, the whole world. Okay, but what's that? I forgot how to tie the knot.
Well, let's transition. What about fire? We did the anatomy of a fire. We did some different types of ignition. What stood out to you guys about fire? What'd you like? What was challenging?
I don't know if we got a picture of it, but one of my favorite moments was the look in Al's eyes that first night when he got the ferro rod and the ignition and the flame. Like, that was awesome. I was so pumped for you, like, and your eyes were like on fire with the, with that nest. It was awesome.
It's awesome.
Yeah. It was like a moment, to start everything off. It was
so
cool.
Good.
Yeah. But fire was it was not only like super challenging, but it was super rewarding, and not just like, oh, you get to see the fruit of a fire, but then you kind of see like, all right, now this is what's gonna warm the water for food. Here's what's gonna warm our tortillas. Here's what's gonna make our coffee. Here's this thing that we're gonna keep using, and so not just rewarding from like a personal satisfaction, like I accomplished a task. I mean, that's really awesome, but like it kept going. It kept, and so much so we're even into like the worship in the evening. The fire is pivotal and right in front of us, and providing. Then it gets cold. It's providing heat. Like, it just kept being rewarding. And so for me, fire, I think throughout this entire week has been one of those things that God has been using to just remind me of His presence, that he's our comforter. He's near. He's warm. And also he is he is the fire in us to empower us to do work in the ministry and all that he's called us to. And like a fire that can wane, not that his presence wanes as in magnitude, but in the same way that we want the fire to keep raging. God desires that we continue to be filled with His Spirit. So fire was great. It was really
Yeah,
helpful.
and both of you. I mean, one of my highlights of the trip was seeing both of you get your bow drill fire on the first day. You know, working hard. Josiah's instruction really top notch, and y'all staying at it, getting your coal, getting your tinder bundle to ignite, and then having your fire lay all ready to go and getting that fire. That's a big deal. You guys did a really great job with that. Yeah.
There's something we've talked about mindset too, survival mindset, and that for me, the fact that when we started this thing, there was like, oh, we guarantee we're going to get this fire. That really did give me a confidence, even when you're telling us that, oh, it's moisture in the air today, this may not be a good day. In my mind, I'm going, but we're then you got it, and we're like, oh, I'm like, all right, we're going to do it. But just the fact that someone else believed in you and believed that it was possible, and for whatever reason, as much as I've said already that I didn't think we were going to be able to do certain things, that was prior to being here. That was prior to being around the brothers. So it was prior to that. At that, I was like, man, I think we're going to be able to do this. And so that just speaks to how just the confidence in one another and the brotherhood around you and believing what is true can totally impact just your the way you approach anything and whether you're discouraged or not. So thanks for believing in us.
I think that goes for all the different things, like whether it was shelter, fire, water, food, all those things. The prospect of having to be in a situation where you have to procure those things for survival with somebody as opposed to by yourself, like there's a huge difference between those two things, and like being able to pool resources and knowledge and skills and energy, together makes survival way more feasible and enjoyable,
Right.
As opposed to having to try and do that all by yourself. Even with the snares and stuff, like doing those together and kind of, walking through them together, like, and you're learning from each other, and you're seeing, the different ways that it's like, oh, I'm going to try not to do it that way, is helpful, as opposed to just being on your ace by yourself.
Yeah. What about the traps and snares? We set up a little trap and snare course so you could learn some triggers on some spring poles. Kind of what stood out to you guys about that?
It stood out that it was that in order to catch one thing, like the rule of 10 traps to one meal, getting all of the materials prepared before you go set them, so you're not leaving your scent everywhere. That's one of those other things that makes so much sense. I don't know why I would have not thought of that. Wear your gloves, don't put your that all makes sense. But I didn't think about those things. So those two things were, I think, they're not even a skill. It's just a thought.
Surprising how simple they were. I think I was expecting it to be a little more complicated than it was in terms of mechanics and everything. It's incredibly simple little operating systems, but yet effective, in the right environment with the right amount, but if the animal's going to go through that, if you've done it right, it's going to work.
And the Voyager adventure trip is the only trip where we actually do get small game permits, and we actually do hunt small game. But you know, these traps and snares are only for, you know, survival situation. You
Yeah.
have to check with your local laws and make sure you have all the permits to do that right, and you don't do anything illegal. And trapping and snares is illegal in most states, so you gotta be real careful with that.
And I think y'all's the personalities around the crew are all unique, but God did something that yoked us together, united us. I think it's pretty cool. I think I laughed off all the food we ate.
Lots of food and lots of laughter.
Of food. Like, it was a bushcraft feast and celebration. There really was.
And we did eat good.
We ate great.
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the best memories. It was like that in tandem with all the skills.
Yeah.
It's like the skills have value and merit and worth on their own, but they're exponentially better when done among a camaraderie of brothers. And so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Amen to that.
Yeah, and I appreciate, Matt. I appreciate your obedience to the Lord and stepping out and doing this, setting these types of opportunities up to get fellow brothers together. You know, yeah, I was here in instructor capacity when it came to the bushcraft survival wilderness living stuff, but when it came down to the discipleship, walking out life, and you know, there was definitely a lot of sharpening going on. It was iron on iron throughout the whole time. And so, you know, the evening prayers, morning prayers, the talks, skill talks that you put a lot of time into, and just, you know, I don't know, it's like we had a bunch of mini sermons, and it was like the four of us just getting a word all together and just bouncing off, and it was just beautiful. And it couldn't happen without your yes and your obedience to what the Lord's put on your heart. So thanks for setting it up. Be encouraged, and I think you're onto something. Keep going with it. I look forward to seeing the fruits of this labor. So it's awesome.
Amen.
Thank you.
Well, and I'm so grateful to know you and to partner with you, and what you're doing with Kingdom Outdoors in Starkville, Mississippi is absolutely incredible. Check out Josiah Buckner at Kingdom Outdoors, www.kingdomoutdoors.com, and go on one of Josiah's trip. He does wilderness living skills trips throughout the year, and couldn't recommend that highly enough. And check out Revelo.live, www.revelo.live. We've got a Explorer Adventure coming up in July, where we go backpacking and fly fishing in the high altitude mountains, not too high altitude, but in the mountains of Wyoming. It's a great trip. That'll happen in July, and then in the end of September, early October, we'll be doing the Voyager adventure trip. That's going to be up in northern Minnesota.
It's beautiful.
Do some portaging, some paddling. We do hunt grouse with slingshots. It's a lot of fun. And then we'll be back here this time next year for the Revelo Scout Adventure. So check it out. Grab a friend or two. Talk to your church leadership. Talk to your business leadership. Find the line item in your organization's budget for continuing education or leadership development, and make a plan, work the plan, and come on out. You'll be glad you did.
100%.
It's why we're here.